And let's not forget the anger that exploded into one of the darkest days in American history. Bloodthirsty rioters attacking the seat of our democracy on January 6th. Let's not forget they tried to overturn a free and fair election. And let's not forget the rioters put up a gallows outside and chanted, "Hang Mike Pence." Let's not forget the then vice president and his family had to run for their lives. Don't believe me? Look, there's a video right there. We can never forget what we saw. But apparently, Mike Pence has forgotten all about it. Imagine that. I want you to listen to him resorting to page 1 in the Trump playbook, blame the media. Really, he's trying to blame the media for the attack by violent rioters, Trump supporters, an attack that forced him to run for his life with his family.
I know the media wants to distract from the Biden administration's failed agenda by focusing on one day in January. They want to use that one day to try and demean the character and intentions of 74 million Americans who believed we could be strong again and prosperous again and supported our administration in 2016 and in 2020.
Google Stockholm Syndrome. Trying to get on the good side of the man who stood by and did nothing while Pence's life was literally in danger, all because he did his job instead of trying to overturn the election as his boss wanted him to do. And what happened on January 6th? Not just about one day. It's about the very real threat to our democracy. The anger, the misinformation, still out there. The big lie of non-existent election fraud, still out there, laying the groundwork for the next time. But far too many Republicans are putting their political lives ahead of the defense of our democracy. Nikki Haley. Okay, Nikki Haley telling the Wall Street Journal the former president is a friend and saying that she'd consult with him before throwing her hat into the ring for a White House run. I feel like I know how that conversation would go. And I probably can't repeat the exact words that he might use. Remember when she said that she was disgusted by his treatment of Mike Pence? Disgusted. Remember when she said that she didn't think the former president was going to be in the picture anymore? Now she says they need him in the GOP. The last thing they need. And then there is former Trump White House press secretary Stephanie Grisham, you know, the one who never held a press briefing, which was her job. Now she is warning if the former president were to win a second term, he would surround himself with the January 6th crowd.
I have said people such as Sidney Powell or Rudy Giuliani or some of the people who believe wholeheartedly in these conspiracy theories, I believe that if he were to win in 2024, he will pick whoever stood by him, you know, defended him, and he will place those people who will have defended the indefensible into the White House.
Okay. There's so much I want to say. Well, where were these people when it was happening? When they were, don't roll, just hold the prompt. Where were these people when they were, where was this attitude when they were on Fox News saying the most insane stuff, defending the most insane behavior, talking crap about CNN and the fake news, not holding press conferences, making excuses for everything that Trump did, playing cleanup on aisle 45. Every day. The fake news. Now they want to come on CNN. Why do you want to come on CNN to sell a book when all you did was talk crap about CNN? Huh? Or any other network. Go on the Fox Propaganda Network and sell your book. Why didn't you stand up for our democracy when you had the chance to do it? when it mattered, before there was a January 6th, because you saw it coming. Stephanie Grisham, the fact is she saw plenty when she was in the White House herself. She could have warned America then. She didn't do it. Now she's running to Jake Tapper, talking about the then president was trying to stage a coup. No crap.
You think that the president was essentially trying to stage a coup?
I do. When you look at what he was doing to Vice President Pence, when you look at how many ways he was trying to get people and phone calls, even with Georgia and Arizona, and then again with pressuring Mike Pence with all he wanted to do, and then that memo that has now come out about all the ways to overturn this election. I do. It's dangerous.
Yeah, it's dangerous. You could have done that when you were the press secretary. And a disgraced, twice impeached, one-term former president plotting to get back into the White House is absolutely a threat to our democracy. Meanwhile, the duly elected president of the United States is taking his case to America as his agenda hangs in the balance.
These bills are not about left versus right, or moderate versus progressive, or anything that pits Americans against one another. These bills are about competitiveness versus complacency. They're about opportunity versus decay. They're about leading the world or continuing to let the world pass us by, which is literally happening.
And considering the nuclear option, a carve-out of the filibuster to raise a debt ceiling by October 18th.
Are Democrats considering using the nuclear option to raise the debt limit? Using a carve-out with the filibuster to raise the debt limit?
Oh, I think that's a real possibility.
So if you think the debt ceiling doesn't matter to you, okay, if you're thinking, I want you to really think about this, okay? Because this is something that affects every single American, not just in the long term, not just in the short term, but in the long term, okay? So think about this. What if you don't get your Social Security payment on time? What if it really affects your 401k and it gets hammered? What if mortgage rates skyrocket and you can't afford a house? What if you lose your job? That is what could happen if Republicans refuse to do their jobs. That's how toxic our politics have become. So, the tell-all people who work for the administration, you could have headed this off before it got to this point. Where were you? And why now?